Giselle Hartman stepped out of her graphite Porsche, her eyes locking onto the weathered car parked just 2 spots away. Decades of wear had turned its once brilliant red paint into a dull, dried blood color. A jagged crack ran across the back window, and the chrome trim had lost its luster completely. The man climbing out of it wore faded work pants and a simple plain cotton shirt. His hair was messy and his hands were rough and calloused from years of hard, honest work. Giselle let the silence linger, making sure that uncomfortable moment felt completely intentional. Then she raised her voice, making sure everyone in the concrete parking garage would hear. I thought this city had strict laws against dumping abandoned cars. A few bystanders laughed, but the man simply stayed quiet. He just opened the rear door, lifting out a 7-year-old girl hugging a tiny model engine to her chest. Not one person in that garage had any idea what was hiding under all that rust. No one except him. Let's look closer. Because what was under that hood might change how you and I look at things we easily dismiss. That vintage car had always been parked on the short gravel driveway right next to his house. Wyatt had kept it for 11 years, inheriting it the very winter his father passed away. Through all those years, he never once considered repainting that faded, worn-out exterior. To the casual eye, it looked totally abandoned. At least, that is what judgmental strangers always thought whenever they walked past. Over time, the original factory red had oxidized into a dark, patchy, rust-colored brown. A shallow dent marked the metal panel just above the rear wheel. The long chrome strip running down the passenger side had lost its bright gleam. The hood badge was once legendary to those who truly appreciated Italian engineering. Now it was so faded that most people could not even recognize the brand anymore. But you and I know better. Where others saw a rusty eyesore, Wyatt saw his father. Luna pulled the heavy door open, climbing inside and setting the model engine on her lap. She stared out through the cracked windshield as Wyatt finally started up the engine. And that motor, that beautiful hidden masterpiece purring under the hood. It roared to life with a deep, steady power, proving true value is found in craftsmanship, not a flashy shell. Are we going past the big fountain today? Luna asked him. We are driving past the Hartman building, Wyatt told her. Your school is holding the science fair in their courtyard this year, remember? Oh, she murmured softly. Then a moment later, can we still see the fountain? If we make it early, and they had plenty of time. The Hartman building towered over the financial district, 12 stories of polished glass and cold, dark steel. It was built purely to project power, screaming success before you could even read the brass sign. Hartman and Associates occupied the top 3 penthouse floors of the tower. The firm advised on massive financial investments and major corporate buyouts. They assessed the value of giant corporations across North America and Europe. On paper, her business was an absolute triumph. A 34-year-old named Giselle Hartman ran the entire operation. She built it from a tiny rented room into a powerhouse wealth firm, dominating the financial headlines every single week. That morning, Giselle was taking her 3rd business call before even finishing her first latte. She always drove herself. She considered it a vital sign of her own discipline. Her car was a flawless graphite Porsche Cayenne, kept on a strict maintenance plan and washed weekly. She loudly championed this superficial view, completely blind to hidden depth. She assumed that how someone polished their material goods was a direct reflection of how they handled their actual real-world jobs. The rich boss created this shallow rule in her 20s, back when she built her startup from nothing and needed quick ways to judge people. She never once paused to search for hidden value underneath. To her, the truth was simple. Just look at Carter Blake, her chief financial officer. He waited by the glass doors as she arrived, clutching 2 folders and his morning coffee. That tense, anxious grip showed he had been waiting there for ages. Carter was 41 and sharply dressed, and absolutely terrified to challenge his boss over anything that might risk his high-paying role. He was just a useful, shiny tool. Giselle saw through his act, though she rarely admitted his cheap loyalty aloud. Meanwhile, Diana Walsh was already upstairs quietly doing her job. Diana was 30 and had managed Giselle's chaotic life as her assistant for 4 years. She was quiet and incredibly organized, with a rare precision Giselle used but never truly understood. Diana never filled silent rooms with mindless chatter, and she refused to fake a laugh just to please the boss. Giselle simply filed these qualities away as basic office skills. She never bothered looking deeper to find the brilliant woman working behind that desk. Diana's aging father was Harold Walsh. At 68, he had spent 40 years uncovering hidden beauty as a master restorer of classic cars. He eventually retired to a peaceful western Massachusetts home, hiding 3 classic project cars inside a dusty old barn. He received weekly calls from Diana about everyday things, well, at least until recently. Let's look at that morning together when Giselle noticed the rusty car before she saw the driver. It was parked right in the visitor lot, inches from her reserved spot. It stopped her completely cold in the exact way that high-end, flashy sports cars usually stun ordinary people. But not because it was beautiful. To her, it looked ruined. It sat low, its peeling paint and rust completely hiding a far more valuable past. The rear window even showed a small crack in its bottom corner. You could not guess its true age at first glance, making it a fascinating mystery. Most classic cars shout their era, but this dusty machine kept its secrets. Giselle stepped out of her shiny Cayenne, glaring at the vehicle. Then her critical gaze shifted to the single father stepping out of it. He looked about 37, with strong calloused forearms shaped by hard physical work rather than a gym. He wore faded work pants and a plain gray shirt. His messy hair desperately needed a trim. To her, he was just another blue-collar worker delivering a package, asking about a shipment, or picking up some dull paperwork. He did not look to our CEO like someone who belonged anywhere near her corporate headquarters. He reached gently into the back to lift out his little girl, who was clutching a small model car engine tightly. Her yes-man Carter suddenly appeared, rushing over from the glass lobby. He glared down at the rusty car. We all know that smug expression. He smirked, waiting for his boss to say what he was already thinking. Giselle took the bait. Is that garbage actually parked here? She sneered. Let's step into that quiet morning garage together, where every small sound echoed off the cold concrete pillars. A few early arrivals paused and glanced over. I was pretty sure this was a private executive garage. The single father stood tall, holding his little girl. He just stared back at the wealthy CEO. No anger or shame in his eyes, just solid like a quiet mountain that disregards any superficial judgment. We have a visitor pass, he replied in a calm voice. Science fair. The school rented the east courtyard today. Giselle circled the rusty old car slowly, walking with the predatory stride she used when tearing apart a weak business pitch. Her sharp heels echoed loudly on the concrete. She judged the faded hood, the flaking chrome, and the battered side panels. She stared at the faded classic car badge. What even is this junk? She spat the question out, completely blind to the true history of the vehicle. This belongs in a museum, a really sad one, Carter chuckled. A couple of junior staff heading for the elevator stopped to watch. The father remained completely silent. He placed his daughter gently on the ground, kneeled to her eye level, and whispered to her. The little girl nodded. She turned her face away from Giselle, but the tense angle of her tiny shoulders revealed a quiet shame, making at least one observer in that garage feel a sudden, sharp pang of regret. That uneasy observer was Diana. She had just come down to return a folder Giselle left in her luxury vehicle the previous night, and she reached the edge of the garage just in time to hear the entire ugly exchange. She froze there, clutching the folder tightly, just watching them. I think we should head inside, she told Giselle, her voice flat and completely neutral. Giselle glared at her, glanced back at the weathered classic car, and scoffed at the father holding his daughter's hand. Enjoy your little science fair, Giselle smirked. The fake sweetness in her tone only made it crueler. Wyatt gave a single nod. Thanks. He said it flatly, like he was just confirming the weather forecast, before turning to walk his little girl toward the main courtyard doors. Luna never looked back at them as she walked away. She whispered a quiet question that only her dad was meant to catch. And it broke his heart. Daddy, did that lady hate our car? Wyatt just squeezed her tiny hand tighter and stayed silent, knowing that some painful questions do not need a spoken answer. Diana lingered in the quiet garage for a moment after Giselle finally walked back inside. She stared at the neglected vehicle. While Giselle was busy mocking it, Diana noticed the hood was not fully latched. a common flaw in vintage vehicles, with the safety catch worn completely smooth. The gap was tiny, maybe an inch, but in that bright morning light it was plenty. She caught a quick glimpse deep inside the engine bay. You and I know that looks deceive, and the pristine mechanics hidden inside shattered the illusion of this rusty shell. She pulled out her phone, snapping a photo of that narrow gap, capturing the flawless metal beneath. The rare, custom components were unmistakable to her trained eyes. Then she slipped the phone away, walked inside with her folder, keeping this incredible secret entirely to herself. Later that evening, after Giselle finally left, and Carter went home, leaving the corporate office practically a ghost town. Let's look closer. Diana sat at her kitchen table, zooming in on that ignored laptop photo. Behind her sat her father's forgotten heavy reference books. Rare volumes on vintage European cars, revealing hidden mechanics, lost marks, and secret automotive history. The exact books from a lifetime spent obsessed with finding the true value others easily miss. She grabbed one, hunting through illustrations to match the strange engine detail hiding in that rusty photo. Then she dialed her dad. Harold Walsh answered on the second ring, just like he always did. Deep inside some dusty, forgotten corner of the barn he occupied that night. "I have a question," Diana told him, "about an engine." Across the line, a heavy wrench clattered against his metal workbench. "Go ahead," she detailed the overlooked mechanics she had spotted. That strange intake manifold setup, the bizarre routing of those oil lines, the distinct valve covers. Details totally invisible today, vastly different from any classic car restoration piece she had ever seen before. Harold went completely silent for a long moment. "The oil lines?" he finally asked. "You said they run in a V-shape off the secondary block?" "Yes." "And the valve covers are ribbed, lateral ribs, not longitudinal?" "Yes." More dead silence. Then, "Diana, where did you see this car?" she explained, and he went quiet again. "It could be nothing," he cautioned. "Maybe just a clever custom build by an expert. But if it is what I suspect, assuming that rusty chassis actually matches, and if that engine has real provenance, that scrapped car holds true value hidden beneath its ugly surface. What do you actually think it is?" He whispered his theory, and she quickly scribbled that legendary hidden name onto her pad. Beside her laptop, she stared at that incredible hidden truth, realizing how a single detail changes everything. Early the next morning, she tracked down Wyatt Cole in the East Courtyard, catching him after the school science fair wrapped up. Little Luna took second place, clutching a ribbon that was actually red, even though she stubbornly called it blue. Wyatt listened deeply to her detailed breakdown of the judge's decisions with the respect of a man who truly valued a 7-year-old's complex arguments. Diana quietly approached him at a respectful distance, giving this overlooked father plenty of time to notice her before she intruded. "Mr. Cole," she stopped a few feet back, "I want to apologize for yesterday morning. The things said in that parking garage were incredibly rude. I am sorry you faced that." He studied her, showing the exact same quiet, unhurried strength he had shown the day before. "You weren't the one who said anything." "I know, but I stood there." He weighed this, nodding. "You and I know he saw the true value in her quiet apology." "Your daughter is incredibly brilliant," Diana noted. Observing the complex model engine, little Luna proudly showed to a totally confused stranger passing by. "That is a real build, most kids just tape posters." "She built it entirely herself," Wyatt replied. "I only showed her the manual once." "I noticed your car's engine yesterday," Diana mentioned, searching his face for any hidden reaction. "Your engine setup, that specific configuration, I actually know my stuff. My dad did classic auto restoration for 40 years. Wyatt's calm mask shifted just slightly. It was not surprise. "Think about it. That sharp alertness when your true worth is finally recognized in an unexpected place." "You know about engines?" he asked, a little. "Enough to spot this vintage car isn't standard." He studied her, looking beneath the surface. She held his gaze. "Let's look closer," because that quiet strength convinced him to make his next move. He walked to the rusty vehicle, which was still sitting in the visitor lot, and popped the hood. Diana stepped closer, peering into the engine. A heavy silence fell over them. She shifted, letting the sunlight catch a few hidden details. Leaning in, she focused on the dark corner of the engine block. Hiding in plain sight was letters written in what looked like faded white paint marker or an old pen. The strokes were deliberate and unhurried. It was a signature she recognized instantly, printed on the front page of her father's classic car book, a legendary mark most people would completely overlook. A priceless piece of history quietly preserved. She slowly stepped back. She didn't even realize she had covered her mouth until she felt her own trembling fingers against her lips. "Is this genuine?" she whispered. "Yes," Wyatt replied quietly. "Do you realize what this classic vehicle is worth?" He stared at the motor as he always did, not judging its cash value, but appreciating the true history hidden beneath the surface. "I don't look at it like that." That evening, Diana called her dad, eager to reveal the incredible treasure she had uncovered, and Harold Walsh sat silently in his Massachusetts barn. The silence stretched so long she thought the line had gone dead. Then he just whispered, "Good Lord," followed by, "That man has to protect that incredibly beautiful machine." Diana smiled. "I think he already is." Exactly 3 weeks passed. The firm needed an independent appraisal expert for the American side of a massive deal. You and I see how worlds collide. The client was Marco Gentile, an Italian collector buying up vintage cars since the 1950s. He was relocating a chunk of his fleet to the States. He needed a true expert with absolutely no hidden financial motives. Someone whose reputation in the industry was bulletproof. Someone whose eye for true hidden value both sides trusted completely. Every independent source Carter checked pointed to the exact same guy, Wyatt Cole. Carter dropped the file onto Giselle's desk on Thursday afternoon, skipping the small talk entirely. She stared closely at the photo on the cover. Just a standard corporate headshot, typical for elite consulting registries. But she recognized that face, the single dad from the car exhibition. He is ranked top 5 for independent classic car appraisals on pre-1970 European vehicles across the East Coast, Carter explained. Elite collectors in Paris and Milan demand him. No fancy agency, he works solo, strict word of mouth. Giselle just stared at the folder. This massive deal was so critical that blowing the car valuation would destroy their relationship with the Gentile family, a prized client they had chased for 2 years. As we are about to see, getting this right unlocked a European network that money could never buy. "Set up the meeting," she ordered softly. Diana finally made the call. Wyatt answered. He listened quietly, saying absolutely nothing for a long beat when she dropped the firm's prestigious name. She held her breath. "All right," he finally said. "Send the list. See you Thursday." "You and I know looks deceive." Thursday at 2, that same battered car arrived. He parked in a standard spot, wearing a simple overlook jacket over a plain white shirt. True value has no need to impress. He dressed with quiet purpose, knowing that real value never needs the flash of an expensive wardrobe. 8 people waited in that 9th-floor boardroom as he entered. Giselle commanded the head chair. Carter flanked her right, with 3 polished associates lining the table. Diana watched quietly from the corner, notepad ready. 2 sharp representatives from the management team anchored the far end. Wyatt sat down, opened his simple folder and spoke for 45 minutes. He analyzed the classic car collection's records with genuine expertise that needed absolutely zero flash. He pointed out chassis numbers, production dates, and critical gaps others had completely overlooked, showing them the exact, tiny details he used to uncover the truth. He exposed one vintage vehicle with fake paperwork, proving a single detail changed everything. He was not lecturing them. He simply shared facts, speaking with the quiet authority of a man who spent 20 years mastering his craft. Carter silently filled 3 pages with his notes. Giselle stayed silent for 45 minutes. This was highly unusual for her. Usually she dominated meetings with her loud corporate persona, interrupting constantly to project power, ensuring her voice was always the loudest in the entire room. Yet she just sat and listened, never interrupting him once. When Wyatt finished, the clients exchanged a glance. They finally saw his true overlooked worth. Carter shifted to discussing the fee structures. Giselle stayed behind as everyone else left. Diana packed up slowly, sensing the shift, knowing she should stay close but out of sight. The wealthy CEO stared at Wyatt across the empty boardroom table. He just capped his pen, ignoring her gaze. His relaxed posture proved true value needs zero validation from powerful people. "The other morning," she muttered. He glanced up. "I wasn't." She choked. You and I know polished executives rarely fumble like this. She tried again. What I said in the garage was truly unkind. I said it publicly, making it far worse. She paused. I am telling you directly, without a corporate shield, I was wrong. Wyatt studied her with that steady depth she first saw by his rusty car, grounded, real, and entirely genuine. I appreciate that, he said softly. Is that all? Carter had questioned her earlier when she insisted on apologizing face to face. He offered it as a simple warning, as if admitting mistakes somehow damages your polished corporate value. She ignored his shallow advice. I have a young daughter, Wyatt said. He closed his file. She asked me if people hated our rusty car. She is 7. She shouldn't have to absorb someone's bad morning mood. The heavy truth landed. Giselle froze, realizing there was nothing left to fake. But yes, the single dad added, that is all. He stood, grabbed his simple folder, and walked out. Diana watched him leave, then studied Giselle, who sat staring blankly at the polished surface of the boardroom table with an expression Diana had never seen before, a sudden vulnerability she couldn't immediately name. 2 weeks passed. The high-end Gentile valuation event opened at a Back Bay hotel. The grand ballroom was lavishly arranged just for this flashy occasion. Let us look past the polished paint and the perfect paperwork lining the exhibition walls. Wealthy collectors and elite car experts crowded the showroom floor. This high-end show attracted rich executives with rare toys that ordinary working parents could never afford. Ordinary folks never saw it. The elite media only cared about a wealthy crowd obsessed with flawless, shiny paint jobs. Wyatt pulled up at 7:45 in the morning, wanting to finish his rounds before the shallow crowds showed up. Driving his rusty, beaten-up car, a young parking valet immediately judged the car's battered exterior. Horrified, he watched the rusty eyesore roll closer, clearly doing the math to see if he could legally turn this junker away. Wyatt just calmly handed over his pass for the prime VIP parking spots. The arrogant kid glared at it, then silently waved him inside. Inside, the shiny, superficial illusion was flawless. Carter barked out commands, adjusting the displays with the frantic energy of someone working hard since 6 in the morning. Diana, a wealthy, snobbish executive, arrogantly directed the crew by the entrance doors. 3 excited camera operators from major automotive publications readied their high-end gear along the east wall. At 8:30, Marco Gentile arrived driving a truly legendary piece of classic automotive history. A flawless 1963 model, preserved with the obsessive dedication that comes from loving real substance over surface-level flash. He was a small, white-haired gentleman, carrying himself with the calm, quiet grace of someone who had long ago abandoned shallow status symbols, discovering real freedom in things left unpolished. Dressed in a simple dark suit, he carried no flashy luxury gadgets. Getting out, he spoke softly with his driver, ignoring the superficial vanity of the show as he headed inside. He would have walked inside if a dusty, overlooked masterpiece had not stopped him. Wyatt's weathered, rusty car was sitting right near the main entrance, kept away from the pristine VIP vehicles, but Marco stopped dead the moment his trained eyes spotted this hidden gem, completely frozen in place. Just like you and I do when we spot a rare, hidden truth forcing our entire body to halt in awe. He walked slowly toward the beat-up car. His personal assistant, who had worked for him for 12 years and was rarely ever surprised by anything, watched him turn away in silence, following closely behind, completely baffled by his sudden and strange detour. Marco stood right before the weathered, rusty chassis, staring quietly at it for several moments. He walked around, closely examining the worn body lines and the precise curves of the hood. He bent down to inspect the unique angle of the dusty front wheel wells. Standing back up, he studied the profile once more, then whispered a quiet phrase in Italian. His assistant quietly translated, though there was no one else nearby to hear the secret. He insisted he recognized that one-of-a-kind hood design. He had seen the original hand-drawn blueprints for this unique design decades ago tucked inside classified documents his father kept hidden in their Maranello house. The arrogant CEO Diana walked outside, watching the scene in absolute disbelief. Hurrying back in, she found the single father Wyatt, whispering in shock that Marco Gentile was examining his battered old car, completely mesmerized by the dusty, long-forgotten machine outside. Wyatt put down his coffee and walked right outside. Carter followed close behind, trailing two curious camera operators looking for a major scoop. So what do we learn here? True value is rarely flashy. Marco treated a battered, rusty relic with the same deep respect usually reserved for million-dollar showpieces. Giselle finally stepped outside, trailing behind. She hung up her phone the moment Diana appeared at the door with urgent news. Diana used that hushed, tense voice reserved for major secrets, saying, "You should come outside." Marco turned as he heard footsteps. He saw Wyatt approaching, the quiet single father he had observed working hard over the last few days. "This is yours," Marco said, his voice leaving no room for doubt. "It was my father's," Wyatt softly replied as Marco examined the rust. He gently placed his hand on the worn-out fender, entirely free of greed. Instead, his touch was like greeting an old, forgotten friend. "Your father," Marco murmured. "Where did he work?" "He was a mechanic." Maranello, 1972. A brief exchange program for just one single season. Marco's face tightened, hiding a deep shock that went unnoticed by the crowd. "You and I know that look, absolute awe, like a man realizing his entire life's belief is shifting." "There was a secret program," Marco whispered, unearthing a long-lost memory. "My father spoke of it, a handful of American and German engineers. They built a rare run of prototypes that never reached production." "This is one of those cars," Wyatt revealed, leaving Marco utterly speechless. Then he softly asked, "May I see the engine?" Wyatt looked around at the shallow crowd gathering near them. Carter held his folders to look important, while blind photographers held cameras, missing the real treasure entirely. Giselle stood frozen just a step behind the others, watching. Wyatt unlocked the door and popped the hood. Marco stepped forward. He moved slowly, showing deep reverence for the machine rather than its age. He leaned over the dusty engine bay with a devotion most people only reserve for priceless museum paintings, rare first-edition books, or faces they never want to forget. Drawing a small penlight from his jacket, he meticulously scanned the hidden metal and surrounding space. We can both agree that dusty parking lot went completely, breathlessly quiet. As the light caught the left side of the block, Marco stood up straight. He pressed his palms flat against the grimy edge of the bay for a moment. The slight tremble in his hands spoke louder than anything that shallow crowd had ever noticed. He whispered a single sentence in Italian, his voice steady but on the verge of cracking. His assistant translated in a quiet murmur, but those nearby caught every single word. "He says there is a secret signature, and he recognizes the handwriting. He has seen this exact writing on a sacred original factory document, hidden deep in the Maranello archives from 1971. One oblivious photographer finally raised his camera to shoot. Another had already been recording the incredible moment for 45 seconds. Carter whispered some shallow remark to Giselle, but she tuned him out completely. She stared at the rusty engine block, but from her distance, she could not see the tiny life-changing signature. Yet she saw Marco's face and she saw Wyatt's, and the deep contrast between them was incredibly revealing. Marco's expression held the pure, shocked joy of finding a treasure lost to time, while Wyatt's face showed absolutely nothing new. He always knew he had carried that priceless quiet value for years. There was not a single feeling on his face that had not been there for 11 years. What is the lesson? Giselle suddenly remembered her own mocking words echoing off the cold concrete. "Let's look closely at that little girl with the toy engine," whispering to her father as they quietly faded into the crowd. She replayed that superficial word she had weaponized, sad. A heavy, unseen guilt washed over her. She didn't try to brush off this raw, uncomfortable truth. She let that heavy feeling sit, knowing it was the bare minimum she owed to the actual truth. In just 2 days, those revealing photos were spreading through elite collector circles and the everyday mainstream press. That tiny faded signature was authenticated by top analysts hired by 2 separate magazines, and an expert who spent 20 years digging through the Ferrari archives. The overlooked truth was undeniable now. Wyatt's phone rang off the hook. The highest bid came from a quiet, mysterious buyer in Switzerland. A massive 7-figure fortune that Wyatt kept deeply private, though Diana, digging through quiet industry gossip, eventually found it topped $4 million. More massive bids poured in, hidden behind thick walls of corporate middlemen. Some came from rich collectors desperate to keep their real names completely secret. But Wyatt found this superficial secrecy totally meaningless. He quietly turned them down, letting the frantic noise fade back into silence. Carter desperately tried to position his agency as the broker to cash in on this hidden gold mine. Wyatt shut him down with a quiet, polite firmness that left no room for negotiation. Carter pushed, missing the point entirely, but Wyatt calmly refused again, letting the matter sink beneath his calm surface. Little Luna stumbled onto the real news on a classmate's tablet, passed around through the quiet digital channels of the preteen crowd. She walked inside, clutching the glowing screen, and stopped right at the kitchen's edge, looking past the obvious. "Dad, our car is famous." Wyatt was quietly fixing dinner. He turned, looked at the flashy, hyped-up headline, and simply handed it back. "It's not news to us," he murmured. "Are you going to sell it?" He studied her face in the quiet. "Do you want me to?" She weighed this with a 7-year-old's quiet wisdom, displaying a maturity that's beautiful to witness. She let her backpack slide to the floor and climbed onto a kitchen stool. "No," she whispered softly, "because it belongs to Grandpa." Wyatt turned back to the stove, keeping his emotions hidden. "That's right." A week later, Giselle drove out to find the real person behind that registry address. The long road led her to a quiet neighborhood northwest of the city, full of humble houses hiding rich, meaningful lives. Lawns were either perfectly trimmed or wildly overgrown, with absolutely no middle ground in sight. Wyatt's humble house was the latter. It was a place where true care was poured into unseen details instead of just the superficial grass. She left Carter behind, and she made sure to leave Diana behind too. Holding a small bakery box she bought along the way, she sat in her car silently hoping this modest offering felt genuine rather than some cheap theatrical stunt. This couldn't be another corporate performance. You and I know she had to face her real motives, or this apology meant nothing. Underneath that simple cardboard, it wasn't a prop. She had bought those pastries sincerely, simply because she had no clue how to face a man she had so publicly and superficially judged with empty hands. And the modest box felt like a truly honest confession of her shame, rather than some hollow, calculated corporate strategy. You and I know appearances deceive. When she knocked, Wyatt answered, completely unsurprised. She wondered if Diana had warned him, though she doubted anyone had. She realized he simply kept his real reactions buried deep beneath that calm exterior. "I wanted to come myself," she told him, "not send a messenger." He stepped back, and taking that silent invitation, she finally walked inside. His modest home was spotless, showing the quiet care of someone who clearly did not have much extra space, yet arranged everything they owned with deliberate care. Books lined a low shelf, and a little girl's crayon drawing hung on the fridge, next to a faded photo on the windowsill, a tiny detail she overlooked before turning away. A faint scent of motor oil filled the air, a hidden signature she now connected to him, feeling strangely right. She set the bakery box down. "I want to say this clearly," she said. "What I did back in that parking garage was a cruel public insult over things that do not actually matter. That car's cheap appearance meant nothing, yet your little girl saw the whole thing." She paused. "I've been agonizing over that part the most." Wyatt glanced from the pastry box to her face. "She's doing fine," he replied. "I know, but your daughter asked you something when you walked away." "I saw it happen." He did not bother to confirm or deny it. He merely watched her with a steady calm she now realized was not just empty silence, but instead the quiet proof of a deeply grounded, unbreakable spirit. "Luna will be fine," he said plainly. "She already is, I know. People always judge the surfaces they do not understand," he added. "I've done it myself, to different things to other people." It is just worth remembering. As you and I often find, he was not lecturing her. He spoke it as a raw truth, openly including himself in that human flaw. Giselle's gaze drifted down to the simple box on the table. Then she noticed the framed windowsill photo, a man sharing Wyatt's features, clearly his father. Standing beside that same rusted vintage car in a sunny yard, smiling at the camera. "Who took that old photo?" she asked. She did not grasp why she cared. "My mother," Wyatt answered, 1973. He had just returned from Italy. She studied the faded image, finding its hidden beauty. The man was laughing hard, pure, unguarded joy that fills a face before you can even stop it. His heavy hand rested proudly on the hood. Giselle finally turned back to face Wyatt. "Your father really loved that car," she said. He loved what rebuilding that engine taught him, Wyatt replied. The vehicle was proof. He claimed he did not just build parts. He learned lessons, and those lessons left behind a solid shape. That car was the shape. The wealthy CEO had absolutely no response. She was not entirely sure a response was even necessary. She slowly lifted the pastry box off the table and offered it to him. Luna will love these treats, she offered. There is a small one inside with pink icing. The bakery clerk promised me it was their favorite flavor. Wyatt quietly accepted the box. A subtle shift softened his rough face, not quite total forgiveness, exactly. Since true forgiveness demanded an emotional ledger, neither was keeping. It was something deeper. What you and I see is two people moving past a bad start, letting a new journey begin. She'll eat the frosting first, he said. She always does. Giselle said her polite goodbyes, returning to her luxury car. She sat there a moment before finally starting her engine, staring out at the gravel driveway, the house, and that cracked open garage door. Inside that dark space rested the front of a very familiar battered car. For 10 years she had built her life around one strict rule. You and I might doubt this, but she believed the surface revealed everything. That a polished exterior always meant real depth. She thought of that rusty car, realizing she completely missed its value, and drove home. Later that night, Wyatt stood in the garage. Outside was silent, just like little Luna. She was fast asleep, but the deepest quiet was parked right inside his heart. A heavy stillness that moved in the day his dad died and never left. But over the years, he had learned to carry that ache without flinching. He popped the hood, but not to fix belts or check the oil. He did it simply because it was his peaceful evening routine. The long day was done, dishes were drying, the house was dark, and this old car was his ultimate private escape. He stood by the engine block, staring down at it the same way. People look at faded photographs of lost loved ones they can never hold again. Little Luna first saw that hidden signature 3 days after the hotel confrontation. Let's look closer at that moment. He lifted the hood and shone his light on the engine block. She leaned right in, placing both tiny hands on the greasy edge of the bay. Leaving behind small handprints he refused to wipe away for an entire week. She studied those cursive letters with the intense focus she reserved for things that truly mattered. The letters looked like a river, she had told him. He was puzzled at first, but taking another look, he suddenly knew exactly what she meant. She touched the legendary signature with one finger, keeping it incredibly gentle. Then she looked up with the bright, knowing eyes of a child who had just discovered something truly special. Grandpa knew him, she asked. They worked together one season. Your grandfather was exceptional at his craft, that is why. Luna thought about that. So it is not just a signature, she said. It means your grandfather was great. Wyatt stared down at his young daughter in silence. Yes, he replied softly, that is exactly what it is. Back in the present, he closed the hood in the quiet night with that same deliberate care. Slow and unhurried. He pressed down until the latch clicked shut with a soft, solid, and final sound. The overlooked car rested in the dark garage, covered in rust on the outside. Yet it was pure gold inside, tucked right between those two layers. Real proof of a working man whose craftsmanship was recognized by someone whose respect meant the world. A quiet pride his son carried for 11 years, never boasting to a single soul. Because we know the truth, don't we? True worth never needs an audience. Just down the hallway, Luna was fast asleep. The tiny model engine she built sat on her shelf, right beside a prized ribbon that was technically red. Her window was open just enough for the cool spring breeze to gently drift inside, nudging the curtains. Wyatt finally turned off the garage light and walked slowly back to the house. All the shallow judgment was finally gone. Under that rusty hood, its true value remained completely untouched. Their home stayed quiet, hiding a simple peace that was enough.